The sickening realization washed over me like a rogue wave as I ducked behind the nurse's station. My heart pounded in my ears, barely allowing me to process the venomous words slithering out of Vivienne Westbrook's mouth. "That little nurse's daughter is hardly an appropriate match for our Alexander," she spat. "Her kind will never fit in with our circles." My stomach twisted into knots as Vivienne's husband muttered his agreement. I pictured my beautiful daughter, Eliza, so full of joy and excitement over her engagement to their son, Alex. This was her supposed future family? As the distressed parents continued their hushed tirade, oblivious to my eavesdropping, indignation swelled within me. How dare these snobby elitists look down on my Eliza? She was kind-hearted, whip-smart, and downright perfect for Alex. But to them, our working-class background meant we'd never be good enough. The truth slammed into me with brutal clarity. They were determined to undermine my daughter's happiness. Panic surged through my veins as I pondered my next steps. Confront them? Warn Eliza? My instinct screamed to shield her from this ugliness, but she deserved to know the disdain her in-laws harbored. I barely registered the end of my shift, too consumed by the bitter reality that people I'd trusted were hell-bent on sabotaging my child's future over petty prejudices. As I left the hospital, the usual comforts of my modest townhouse offered little solace. Eliza and Alex would be home in a couple of hours, both glowing with the innocence of new love. Could I shatter that for them? By the time I heard Eliza's key turning the lock, my decision was made. I would observe, gather proof of Vivienne's underhanded tactics, and strike when I held the power to protect my daughter without destroying her dreams. The perfect marriage was sacred to Eliza, and I'd ensure she got that, even if I had to drag her in-laws' dark secrets into the light to make it happen. Eliza bounded in, face alight with excitement as she recounted every magical detail of her dress fitting. Alex's warm smile as he gazed at her filled me with both joy and dread. I forced a grin, vowing to myself that no matter what toxic scheme Vivienne unleashed, this genuine love would endure. Those Westbrooks had no idea of the fierce loyalty stirring in this protective mother's heart. Over the following weeks, I put my nurse's training in observation to malicious use, scrutinizing every interaction between Eliza and the Westbrooks with laser-like intensity. My sole mission? Document every slight, every patronizing remark, every attempt to undermine my daughter's confidence by that vile woman, Vivienne. The signs were impossible to miss once I knew where to look. The thinly veiled sneers as Eliza gushed about her simple yet heartfelt dream wedding. The constant comments implying our modest home was a place of squalor. Vivienne's shrill insistence that Eliza take etiquette classes to polish her rough edges. Worst of all were the conversations I managed to catch between Vivienne and her submissive, spineless husband when they thought no one could hear. "She's hardly more than a charity case," Vivienne hissed about my Eliza during one particularly grating luncheon. "Over my dead body will that little nobody sully our family's standing." My fists clenched until nails dug bloody crescents into my palms. The rage bubbling inside me fought against years of learning to turn the other cheek. But I couldn't lash out blindly, not without jeopardizing Eliza's happiness if this all backfired spectacularly. No, I required a machete, not a hammer, to cut through Vivienne's web of deceit and cruelty. Everything became clear when a friend extended a calculating invitation to that Viper's elite country club, giving me a glimpse into her real circle. Vivienne was the queen bee, every malicious demand and plot indulged by her sycophantic cronies. They feared her curated prim and proper persona and philanthropic standing in the community. I smirked to myself as I observed their pathetic admiration. If they had any idea about the real Vivienne Westbrook, the cruel manipulator who thought nothing of crushing her only son's happiness for the sake of appearances, well, their perfect society would crumble like a cookie around her. An elaborate facade was being maintained, and I knew the secret weak points that could topple it. Much as the thought of destroying Eliza's innocence pained me, I recognized this as the only path to lasting justice and peace for my family. The vile truth about Vivienne Westbrook's past would be exhumed and gently broken to Eliza in a way that ensured the real villains were held accountable. Perhaps then, my daughter could start her marriage free of hatred and judgment from these societies of gilded snakes. If Vivienne wanted open warfare, I would oblige. and reduce her sterling reputation to ashes. The devil's plan sprang into motion at Eliza's engagement party. I should have seen the unraveling threads, but was too blinded by pride over my daughter's happiness to foresee Vivian's cruelty. It started with the snide asides about our quaint little banquet hall, the none too subtle grimaces at our buffet menu of heartwarming family recipes, always delivered through a saccharine smile, every single barb digging at Eliza's resolve. Then the unthinkable happened, the incident that opened my eyes to Vivian's true depravity. Poor Eliza was midway through an anecdote about her hopes of traveling the world, Alex, when that wretched harpy butted in. "Darling, a word of advice," Vivian crooned with dripping condescension. "A gentle wife is better seen than heard. Why don't you allow the menfolk to discuss worldly affairs?" My heart shattered as Eliza's radiant smile withered into a wounded deer's expression. The room froze over, everyone looking anywhere but at my daughter's public shaming. My hands trembled as a righteous inferno of rage ignited within me. Before I could unleash my protective fury, Vivian continued her calculated strikes. "No need to look so startled, Eliza dear. We'll have you shaped into a proper lady soon enough." Guests gasped and murmured, but none dared challenge this pompous tyrant parading as Westbrook family matriarch. This despicable insult to my child went undefended and unchallenged by the wealthy cowards surrounding us, all too worried about their social standing to stand up against Vivian's cruelty. In that moment, I realized with horrifying certainty that this engagement was doomed from the start. Vivian would never allow the low-born Eliza entry into her snobbish circle. My daughter's dreams of a happiness were mere playthings to be tormented and ultimately discarded by these people. I wanted to scream, to demand that Vivian and her accomplices leave at once. But then I saw Eliza, lip quivering as she struggled to maintain her composure amidst the pitying looks from the gathered jackals, and knew I had to play this perfectly. She would get her vengeance. They all would pay for breaking my daughter's spirit. But this situation required a surgical strike, not a hammer. I squeezed Eliza's hand, offering her a subtle nod of reassurance. Vivian's satisfied smirk would soon be wiped from her twisted face permanently. As the festivities resumed around me like a farce, my mind already raced with contingencies, strategies on how to dismantle Vivian's entire life piece by precious piece. I would burn her sterling reputation to the ground, and from those ashes, my Eliza would rise like a phoenix, free from the prejudiced chains this wretched family shackled her with. The days following that disastrous engagement party blurred together. Vivian's malicious taunts and Eliza's crestfallen expression replayed in an endless loop in my mind, fueling a fury that burned hotter with each passing hour. I found myself unable to directly confront my daughter about the incident, terrified that shattering her idealized view of the Westbrooks would inflict deeper wounds. So instead, I hatched a plan, a precise strike to decimate Vivian's carefully curated facade and repulse any further humiliation on Eliza. My first ally was Angela, a friend from the hospital who had witnessed enough of Vivian's entitled antics to despise that wretched woman as much as I did. When I confided in her my observations and intent to take Vivian down by any means necessary, Angela immediately vowed to help gather the arsenal we needed. "That condescending bitch has had this coming for years," she seethed, green eyes flashing with vindication. "I'm in. What's the plan?" I laid out the essentials. Dig up any scrap of skeleton that laid hidden in Vivian's upright closet, unearth every scandal and transgression. Tear away the veil concealing her true nature from the world. Angela's lips curled into a wolfish grin. "Consider it done. That hag won't know what hit her." With my most formidable comrade secured, I turned my sights to recruiting professional aid. I needed a master of extraction, someone who could uncover Vivian's buried secrets with ruthless precision. Someone like Ray Kwan, the most elite private investigator in the city. Kwan raised a skeptical eyebrow when I announced my reason for hiring him in his dingy, smoke-hazed office. "You want me to take down one of the city's most prominent philanthropists and her old money family? For free?" His gruff laughter filled the cramped space. "Lady, that's insane." I leveled him with a stare that would cauterize steel. "Mr. Kwan, how would you like an exclusive Panama Papers levels of exposure? Enough salacious details to bury that whole rotten brood of elite parasites?" His laughter ceased, eyes narrowing calculatingly. I pressed on, unwavering. Vivienne Westbrook has deeply wronged my family. I intend to dismantle her wretched empire and leave her family name disgraced for generations. So I'll ask again, are you in, or shall I take my digging elsewhere? The PI's craggy face split into a savage grin, all thoughts of fees or legality clearly banished by the potential glory of such a takedown. You've got my full team ready when you are, Mrs. Carter. Let's burn this bitch's world to the ground. I returned his vicious smile, a steadfast flame of determination igniting in my heart. Excellent. We begin immediately. Vivienne's day of reckoning was being forged, her downfall meticulously assembled like a titan's spear. Soon, the battle lines would be irreversibly drawn. And I would show no mercy in defending my family's honor against those pompous parasites who dared to make an enemy of me. The weeks crawled by intense anticipation as Angela, Ray, and I meticulously assembled the case against Vivienne Westbrook. Every uncovered nugget of incriminating evidence, every unearthed financial inconsistency or whispered rumor of impropriety bolstered my conviction that her legendary status was a hollow mirage. We were halfway through compiling our arsenal when fate, or perhaps karmic intervention, provided us with the ultimate escalation. It was a crisp autumn evening when I arrived at the Westbrooks' sprawling estate, intent on picking up Eliza for one of our weekly dinner dates. My heart clenched at her dejected countenance lately, the aftershocks of Vivienne's engagement party bullying still reverberating. As I approached the door, raised voices echoed from the parlor, Vivienne's shrill condescension slicing through the air like a blade. I paused, body tensing automatically. Beside me, an open window afforded an unobstructed view, allowing the poisonous words to wash over me with full force. Pathetic delusion that she belongs in our world, Vivienne was sneering with acidic contempt. You're marrying beneath your stock, Alexander. Frankly, I'm embarrassed to be associated with her trashy breed. White-hot fury detonated through my veins as I registered who she was maligning, my beloved Eliza. I prepared to burst through and unleash the protective wrath of a mother scorned. But then came Alex's response, soft yet carrying an unmistakable tremor of doubt. Mother, you can't truly feel that way about Eliza. She's kind, loving, everything a noble wife should. Enough! Vivienne's shriek cut through his protests like a whip crack. I will not allow that nobody's soiled hands to sully generations of respected Windsor lineage. She is the help, Alexander, born to serve, not stand as our equals through some farcical marriage. A deafening silence fell, thick and suffocating. My breath seized in my lungs, awaiting Alex's defense of the woman he claimed to love. The silence persisted. Revulsion coiled through me like a torrent of snakes. This petulant, arrogant cretin had just decimated my Eliza's self-worth, and their love was met with nothing. No protest, no defiance against his mother's verbal assault. I backed away from the window, oblivious to the crunch of gravel beneath my feet giving away my presence. Unearned anguish rippled through me at such callous disregard for Eliza's dignity, until rage swiftly extinguished it. Like the white-hot blast of a sun going nuclear, clarity blazed within my soul with frightening intensity. No more holding back. No more merciful half-measures with these depraved aristocrats. The past weeks of scheming were rendered utterly obsolete by the furnace of justified vengeance stoked within my heart. Vivienne Westbrook wanted total war on my family's humanity. She would receive a lifetime of scars and humiliation to bear as reminder of the catastrophe she begged for. I stormed away without another glance, discarding any lingering inhibitions in my wake. As God as my witness, that rancid matriarch and her entire brood of self-entitled leeches would reap the unholy karmic fury they had sown, and they would beg for oblivion before the end. The charity gala was the perfect stage for Vivienne Westbrook's grand unveiling. As one of the city's largest philanthropic events, her despicable behavior would be displayed before the entire high society she lorded over. We landed the first strike during her opening speech, Angela strategically positioned to capture the streaming video on her phone. As Vivienne droned on about generosity and human decency with that smugly oblivious air, Ray's hired hackers took control, projecting a sequence of damning financial records across the massive screen behind the podium. Vivienne's words strangled into a choked gurgle as line items after line items cataloged a decade's worth of embezzlement and shady dealings from her fraudulent charities. Thousands, then millions in donations siphoned away with ruthless efficiency, funding her family's lavish lifestyle and padding her palatial real estate portfolio. Murmurs of shock and disbelief rippled through the packed auditorium as the truth of Vivian's depravity bombarded them. The esteemed philanthropist's mask withered away, exposing the truly rapacious con artist beneath. Predictably, Vivian quickly regained her senses and scrambled for control, pleas for tech support punctuated by futile stabs at the podium screen controls. Her desperate facade shattered fully when Angela's perfectly timed video sequence took over the visuals. The large screen filled with HD footage of our confrontation outside the Westbrook estate weeks ago, preserving Vivian's hateful sneers and vile insults about my Eliza and our family in unmistakable clarity. I caught the precise moment the blood drained from the matriarch's face as every slur, every vicious condemnation was laid bare before the judging elite masses. Sweet, justified catharsis washed over me at her stunned horror, swiftly burning into righteous outrage as the video culminated in Vivian shrieking about preserving her precious legacy against Eliza's soiled presence. Alex's pitiful, silent acquiescence played out in all its shameful clarity. The gala has descended into chaos, with attendees rushing towards the exits in droves while screaming accusations and furious denials. Vivian's exposed treachery ricocheted across the panicked room in a tidal wave of shock. But it was the face of Woodrow Westbrook, Vivian's disgraced husband slowly lifting his head in our direction, that granted me the most profound satisfaction. Utter desolation and heart-rending betrayal slashed across his features as the breath of his wife's obscene duplicity obliterated their reality. In that moment, a lifetime of lies and arrogance detonated between them. I held that millionaire's gaze steadily, silently promising that this self-inflicted devastation was merely the inception of the upheaval his family's prejudices had unleashed. His stricken expression said it all. The first realization that the Westbrook legacy was essentially extinct, brought down by the cancerous prejudices and cruelty he had allowed to fester unchecked. As security scrambled to understand the cyber attacks still overwhelming their systems, I slipped out a back exit alongside Angela and Ray. My final glance encompassed the ballroom's grand windows, where Vivian now stood isolated, aged 20 years by the destruction of all she had hoarded and allowed to corrupt her humanity. There would be no retrieving the shards of her disgraced life scattered to the winds. The law and the public court were now left to pick over the remains, interrogating her with relentless scrutiny to purge the final vestiges of my thirst for vengeance. My family's honor had been decisively avenged. Now it was simply a matter of allowing the Westbrooks to drown themselves in the wreckage of the societal cancer they had inflicted upon us. No further action would be required. The downfall would be complete, with even the most ardent supporter ultimately repulsed by the sheer vileness on display. It was over. As the blistering finality of that realization struck me under the clear night sky, my voice echoed Angela and Ray's triumphant laughter with a solitary cry of hard-won freedom, the sound shattering through decades of artificially imposed silence and deference. I, Marianne Carter, was unbroken once more. In the aftermath of the gala exposé, Vivian Westbrook's world crumbled with brutal swiftness. Every sordid revelation of her financial digressions and fraudulent charities metastasized across media outlets like a ravenous cancer. Once the initial shock wavered, corporations and fellow high society patrons raced to distance themselves from the disgraced matriarch of lies, severing sponsorships, donations, even honorary board seats with unprecedented haste. Within a week, the Westbrook Family Foundation folded completely under the weight of escalating criminal investigations and asset seizures. The ignominy detonated through Vivian's social circles with equal velocity, the once fawning sycophants unanimously closing ranks to excise her from their insular cliques. I witnessed this rapid unraveling with perverse satisfaction as I holed up with Eliza, tenderly guiding her through the harsh truths behind the facade she had erected her dreams upon. Though devastated, my daughter's sense of self-worth remained intact, a testament to her resilient spirit. "I can't believe they despise me that deeply, simply for not being born wealthy," she whispered one night, tears streaming down her porcelain cheeks. Alex's silence, it was all a lie, every bit of it. I pulled her close, letting the dam burst of anguish and anger pour forth freely. Only when the sobs subsided did I offer her reality's sole silver lining. Their depravity isn't a stain on you, sweetheart. They're the moral lepers, rotten on the inside despite their wealth and status. You were simply too pure to recognize it. I don't even know who I was engaged to anymore, who any of those people were. We settled into silence, emotionally spent, while the news cycle bombarded us with updates on the Westbrook celestial downfall. The pièce de résistance arrived 2 days later, Woodrow Westbrook initiating divorce proceedings against Vivian, his court filing citing charges of emotional cruelty and psychological abuse over his wife's calculated prejudices. Alex, now equally ostracized for his family's toxicity, arrived on our doorstep the next evening. The broken shell that greeted us hardly resembled the confident, charming man Eliza had adored. His eyes, swollen and bloodshot, pleaded for understanding, for the forgiveness it was far too late to grant. When the words finally emerged, they tumbled out as a tormented confession, voice raspy with shame. I knew, on some level, I always knew my mother's capacity for cruelty, but I thought if I ignored it, played along with her elitist demands. His gaze flickered brokenly to Eliza. I convinced myself that love could overcome her prejudices, that you could change her poisoned perspectives. He ran a trembling hand over his face, barely restraining the deluge of remorse. I was so blinded by the legacy she brainwashed me to uphold, her wealth, her status as paragons of society. I lied to myself to keep that myth alive, even after seeing her true nature aim its hatred directly at you. I'm sorrier than you can ever know for the pain I allowed you to suffer. He collapsed fully then, wails of self-loathing choking out any further pleas as the weight of his moral abdication shattered his spirit. Eliza moved to comfort him, but I stayed her hand with a gentle tug. The scars were too raw, too fresh. Offering absolution now would only cheapen her anguish and his consequences. Better to let the flames of his guilt forge Andrew into a truly better man. As for Vivian, her fall played out across the month like a searing opera of entitlement meets justice. Public humiliations mounted relentlessly, friends disavowing her en masse, prestigious societies closing ranks with ruthless efficiency, outraged citizens revoking her honors and achievements. Law enforcement proved equally unmerciful, with state and federal investigators meticulously untangling her illicit finances down to the last siphoned penny. By June, asset seizures had decimated the bulk of the family's estate, both liquid and residential. To Vivian's infinite mortification, Andrew and his father took great delight in publicly repudiating her through the proceedings, fueling the scouring media coverage. When forced to find modest housing after their mansion's liquidation, the once almighty Vivian Westbrook relocated to a motel on the very outskirts of town. Her infamous reputation preceded the disgraced fundraiser wherever she went, ensuring refusal of service and employment as surely as sun rose. The pariah we had rendered her suffering the humiliations and destitution she so vehemently believed the lower class deserved. I watched her sullen, haggard form shuffling through our humble community with vindicated relish. The bright, conquering flame that had burned in her piercing gaze reduced to embers of deeply interred shame and self-loathing. As the summer bloomed around us, bright and renewed with promise, the Westbrook dynasty expired its dying breaths half a world away from their formerly opulent lifestyles, their false grandeur shattered beyond all repair by the prejudices they virulently embraced and promoted. In a cosmic poetic justice, the cancers Vivian inflicted on others ultimately devoured her family from within until their legacy amounted to utter ruination. Their catastrophic downfall now etched into local history as a dire cautionary tale of karmic arrogance and hatred. Only one path remained open for Vivian, a full-fledged exodus from her former dominion, permanently banished to wander as an outcast for the remainder of her wretched days. Whether through persistence or divine reckoning mattered little, the pariah's sentence was cast. As I watched the moving truck containing Vivian's pitiful remnants finally depart our neighborhood under the golden rays of sunrise, I felt a profound sense of closure envelop me like a warm embrace. The demon was vanquished. My family's dignity remained unbroken. the ultimate victory achieved through sheer determination and refusal to allow malice its unjust reign. Eliza and I stood united on that front stoop, bonded by the same resilient spirit that had overcome persecution through the harshest trials imaginable. And as the first morning birds began their gentle chorus around us, I silently renewed the vow that had carried us through these tribulations with integrity intact. Never again would this family cower or experience shame over our humble means. Never again would we suffer the arrogance and cruelty of those who foolishly viewed us as beneath them simply for lacking material excess. Our modest world held far more riches of character and fortitude than any mansion or societal status could outshine. With Vivian's toxic malignancy now fully excised, the path forward shone brilliant with the promise to create and pursue our dreams on our terms. Unobstructed, uncompromised, unbroken. The weeks following Vivian's exile from our town passed in a healing blur. With the poisonous cancer excised, Eliza and I were finally able to process the traumas inflicted and begin mending the fractures in our bond. It wasn't an easy road by any means. There were nights where Eliza's anguished sobs over Alex's complicity echoed through our walls, feeling the devastation of that betrayal anew. Other times, she retreated into an emotionally detached fugue state, almost as if her spirit needed that temporary escape to process the pain. I understood those coping mechanisms all too well, having endured my own existential heartbreaks over the years. So I simply held vigil, letting her cycle through the grief journey at her own pace, while reassuring her that this agony was simply a step towards the other side's healing light. Slowly, achingly, Eliza's spirits began lifting, first through welcome distractions with friends, then the rejuvenating focus of work. The tarnished ideals of her previous engagement dissolved under the purifying crucible of honesty. No more illusions blinded her perspective. When Alex eventually resurfaced with overtures of reconciliation, she met him with a palpable air of indifference, the first true indication that this selfish chapter had closed. His desperate pleas for a second chance at love, at redemption, fell on understandably deaf ears. "I'm sorry, Alex, but that part of my life is over," she stated with finality, her tone laced with wariness over the whole debacle. "What we had was real on my part, but then I never knew the real you. Not until your true colors were forcibly exposed." He crumpled at her words, the damning truth behind them as impossible to deny as gravity itself. Fresh remorse glazed his soulful eyes, but I detected the faint awareness finally sparking within. The understanding that this was a self-inflicted purgatory, the full consequences of his moral frailty, come to lasting roost. A small part of me twinged with pity for him in that moment, even as the majority of my heart swelled with renewed pride for Eliza's steadfast integrity. She had emerged forged anew while he and his family withered away. It seemed poetic justice itself had conspired to grant Eliza's next pivotal phase a clean, empty canvas untainted by the Westbrooks' cruelties. Just over 6 months after their world burned, we watched along with a handful of Andrew and Woodrow's allies as the young couple solemnly recommitted their love on a humble courthouse stoop. The proceedings were mercifully simple, a mere 30-minute formality between two resilient souls who had more than earned their reunion through the fires of struggle. Their matching grins as they turned to face us were radiant, transcendental, the epitome of life's grand beauty shining through after such crushing hardships. "Finally, no more falsehoods or pretenses," Eliza murmured, squeezing my hand with unabashed joy burning in her gaze. "Just us moving forward, together." I returned her smile through a veil of unshed tears, scarcely able to believe the transformative journey that led us here. Blessedly clear of the prejudices that once clouded our skies with misery. For so long I had been so consumed by my mission to demolish Vivian's hate that I lost sight of the pure, simple truth. Family was the only legacy of genuine value this world contained. Not wealth, status, or some outdated aristocratic notion of supremacy. Those temporal trappings meant nothing against the embrace of unconditional love and support forged through adversity's crucible. As that crystalline realization washed over me under the beaming spring sunlight, a profound sense of peace supplanted the fury that had driven me for so long. My daughter's spirit remained unbroken. Our bonds reaffirmed and transcendent of the ugliness once forced upon us. We were free. Eliza and Andrew melted into a jubilant kiss, the first chapter of their new beginning, writing itself in that singular, beautiful moment. Behind them, the glorious petals of the cherry blossom trees coating the courthouse steps like a divine blessing, nature's own benediction, heralding their love's ultimate triumph. I drank in that tranquil, healing scene with every fiber of my soul's being. The demon had been vanquished. The nightmare purged from our lives forever. All that remained was family, one united by resilience, hope, and the unbreakable belief that dignity and moral fortitude are the only true currencies that matter in this life. We had won. 6 months later, I found myself on that same courthouse stoop, watching Eliza animatedly point out the blooming cherry blossoms to her newborn son. A fresh wave of tears threatened as I studied her radiant glow, all remnants of past pain evaporating under the warmth of new life and limitless horizons. Andrew hovered protectively nearby, attentive yet allowing his wife the spotlight as she passed on life's simplest yet most transcendent joys. His eyes shone with the wisdom of a man who had glimpsed the emotional abyss before pulling himself back to the path of righteousness. A pity pang resurfaced briefly as I considered Vivian's all but certain ignorance of this blissful scene playing out, her grandchild's arrival forever denied due to her barbaric prejudices. No matter where she had fled to rebuild her shattered psyche, I hoped reports of this untainted happiness reached her ashamed awareness. Better for the spiteful dragon to know the full extent of what her hatred had cost her in the end. The cherished family moments she would never experience due to the cancerous judgment she fed like a terribly pursed addiction. Let it haunt Vivian's feverish nights and haunted days until her last solitary breath. A purgatorial existence of richly deserved isolation from the overflowing grace she had so violently rejected. Here in this hallowed place of new beginnings, her transgressions held no dominion, no sway to taint our hard-earned paradise. This was the domain of love, of humanity's highest callings and profound capacity for healing against all odds. The cycle had finally reset to its purest, most elevated form, the promise of successive generations now cleansed of malice, free to embrace their full potentials, unshackled from toxic prejudice. I felt Andrew's steadying hand alight on my shoulder, offering a heartfelt look of gratitude before joining his cherished family. For far too fleeting an instant, I caught the faint aura of Woodrow in my peripheral vision, the weary patriarch finally at peace, free to adore his first grandchild without Vivian's petulant poison festering between them. Then her presence dissipated, merely an illusion of regrets and inner tumult weighing my heart as those happier souls beckoned me to join their loving tableau. I released a cathartic sigh and stepped forward into their brilliant future. At last the unburdened matriarch of a fierce yet honorable clan, tempered by suffering, yet risen anew through the resilience that is humanity's truest blessing. As I wrapped my arms around the 3 incredible lights of my universe, the lift of their combined love and joy elevated my soul to the highest resonance of peace I'd ever experienced. We had weathered the darkness and emerged reborn, harnessing the profound truth that unified families can overcome any hatred, any injustice, through sheer tenacity of unconditional devotion. Our loved ones would never allow malice's roots to infect new generations. This solemn vow transmitted through our unbreakable embrace, buoyed by the explosion of sweet cherry petals dancing around us on destiny's gentle zephyrs. The cycle was complete.